Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mentors on Tap. I'm Doc Sheldon, and
Hello.
this is my sidekick, Steve Gerinkser. And
Howdy, howdy.
he's gonna do a lot of the talking today, but we're gonna do some talking about onboarding a new client, specifically some of the things you need to get access to, questions you need to get answers to, many of which will be instructive because learning how many times your new client says, "Huh, what's that?" when you ask them about things like ROI
Exactly.
or analytics or that can be real indicative of what kind of a life you're going to have with them.
Right.
So how you doing,
Very
Steve?
much. We're good. We're ready to start the new year and hit it hard. But it seems like an appropriate conversation to have because we're onboarding a couple of new clients over the next few weeks, and I'm always amazed at when I start asking questions of clients, and they're like, "Well, none of our previous guys ever asked us any of this," and it just baffles me how you could run
Yeah.
any kind of a marketing campaign without some of this information. And, obviously we've got all the basics where you need access to, depending on what you're doing for them, you need access to their PPC accounts or their Google Analytics, their Search Console, sometimes even back end of the website, depending on what you're doing for them. Uh, these are all the basics, and you'll see a lot of the really simple SEO or simple PPC projects. That's all they ever ask for, and they just go to work. And it confuses me because if you don't have certain pieces of information, how do you even know if you're going to be successful? Right out of the box, one of the first things I ask customers if they know what their profit margin is on whatever it is they're selling.
And
And
about
you
that,
would
very,
think that
very
this is
few of them know.
yeah, well, that's just it. You would think that as a business owner, this would be something that's pretty upfront in their brain, and so few of them have any idea. Uh, they know if they have more money than last month. That's all they know. And they don't know not only what their profit margins are on their different products, but which products are the ones making them the most money. We've been working with a new client, well, I shouldn't say new client, but a client for the last couple of years now, where, financially they're doing wonderfully. They just have no idea why.
Hmm.
you know
Yeah.
yeah. So out of their 20 or 30 products, we went through and spent a lot of time figuring out that out of their 20 or 30 products, 10 of them were losing money, and 5 or 6 were just absolutely funding everything. And so we got rid of the 10 products that were losing money and really hammer the ones that just fill the wheelbarrows full of money for them. So
Well,
that's usually one of my. Go ahead.
I think that's real common that, the advent of the internet made it much easier for people to get into an entrepreneurial stance with an online business. But it's
Mm-hmm.
also, I think we're seeing a lot more entrepreneurs, even in brick and mortars, than we did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very common now. These folks, they got a sudden opportunity, they got a desire, they got the drive to try it, but they have no idea how to run a business. And their whole
Right.
means of measuring their success is, will I be able to pay the rent this month? Will I be able to make payroll this week? And if they can do those things, then everything's good. And the sad part of that is that besides the fact that one misstep can make that go away,
Mm-hmm.
if they just take a good look, like you say, find those 6 or 8 products that are not doing very well for them, that are losing money, and get rid of them, they can be much more successful. And that's a
We're
shame,
seeing.
but I think it's a very common problem that there's very little business acumen amongst businessmen in these small and even medium-sized businesses these days.
Well, we're seeing this a lot more, especially in Amazon,
Yeah.
where everybody and his brother is, sourcing a product from China and having it shipped to the United States and warehoused at Amazon. And they're like, well, I don't understand. I sold through all my product and I lost $2,000. It's like, well, did you account for shipping fees or storage fees or processing fees or returns or any of these other issues? And they find out that, all that has to be baked into their price. They can't say, well, I bought it for $1, so I'm going to sell it for $2. I should make money. That's rarely the case. If you're buying it for $1 and selling it for $3, you should make money. That's kind of a decent baseline, but it depends on what kind of physical product you're selling, or if you're selling digital, or if you're selling a service. And all of these issues, do you have recurring customers? That's become another one of our big questions when we start to ask questions like, do they know what the lifetime value of a customer is?
Most of them don't even have any idea what their cost of acquisition of a new customer is.
Right. And exactly. And if you don't know, let's say you offer a service where they have to come back to you every year. Well, if that customer sticks with you for 10 years and you're getting them for $500 or $1,000 every year, they're worth more than just the $300 they paid you that first time. They're worth $20,000 by the time they're all said and done. And that changes the marketing approach dramatically, especially when it comes to paid traffic.
And customer service.
Well, yeah, exactly. You want to retain those clients because they're already customers. You want to keep them as locked in as possible, which is why most software vendors have gone away from selling you software, and they just let you rent it every year.
I had a client here, sorry to interrupt you, but I had a client here about a year and a half ago maybe, that he was trying to grow his business. And he was selling a service. And so to grow his business, to grow his client base, he started offering a lot of discounts. For new sign-ons, you get a 30% discount, a 50% discount. And he brought in a lot of new customers. But when you've got existing customers who've been with you for 3 years, they're paying $129 a month for a service. And then they see you're bringing in new people at $59 a month service. Some of them get pissed off and leave. And that's exactly what happened. He lost 60% of his existing clients because he was buying business at a loss. And you ended up going under. That's
you have that same issue with cell phones or cable internet or whatever, where it's like, oh yeah, you'll get the first 6 months for $20. And meanwhile, the people that's been with you for 10 years, they're paying $200. So, we like to, know what their lifetime customer value is. And if they don't know, that's usually one of the first things we do is sit down and figure it out. Because, so maybe you've decided that you sell boats and you know that you can afford to pay $500 to get somebody in to buy a boat. That's great. How many of those people buy 2 boats or 3 boats over the course of their life?
Yeah.
Now maybe that, and usually when you're buying their second and third boat, they're scaling up. Very few people buy down when they buy a second or third boat. So now that person that you thought maybe was worth $500 is probably worth $3,000 or $4,000. Now how much would you pay to get that guy in there? So those issues need to be dealt with up front, because you can't set your targets and your thresholds for success if you don't know these numbers. If you're one of the standard PPC guys who just says, oh, look, we got our CPCs down to 19 cents. Well, that's great, but how many of those people actually bought anything of any value?
Well, I'm sure you've seen it as well. A lot of times with a new client, at least, a lot of what you have to do is education. And
Yes.
and I've found that is some of my longest term clients were those that were the most ignorant of business practices when I first hooked up with them. And building a relationship was heavily based on my willingness and ability to teach them how to do these things for themselves so they have a better understanding. That really built a good relationship. And it makes your job easier in the long run, because if they understand what you're doing and why you're trying to do it, it's not a tough sell every time.
Right. And, the other thing that knowing this information allows you to do, we recently sent somebody away because their profit margin on their product didn't allow for any kind of real effective, at least PPC marketing. They were trying to get into an established market, but with a much cheaper product, which is great. That's certainly wonderful. The problem is that the PPC budget and cost has been established by the guys at the higher price, because you're competing for the exact same keywords, and they're perfectly happy to spend $20 a click. And at $20 a click, he's only got to have 10 clicks, and he's losing money. He's got to sell. His sell rate's got to be in the 15 to 20% range just to break even. And after a lot of discussion and talking with him, it was decided that just going straight Google was probably not a good idea, and that some social media work and other avenues were a better fit for that person. But it would have been just as easy to take his money for 6 months and go, well, it looks like it's not going to work. Sorry. And that's just a horrible thing to do to somebody, because a lot of these people got to feed their kids. Yeah. So I take a little bit of responsibility when I take on a customer to make sure that they're more successful than they were when we started together.
Well, sadly, there are people in our industry who are more than happy to take your money if you're dumb enough to give it to them, even though they know that you can't possibly make out on it. There's no ROI. There's, they don't care. And I like to think, of those folks in our industry that I know, I don't know of any off the top of my head that are like that I'm friends with. A couple that I've seen that were like that, they rapidly left my friend list, because that, to me, a consultant, it's a position of trust. You're putting yourself into the organization as a trusted member of their team, which is why these questions are so important, because if you don't know what they're working with, what they're working against, what their budget is, what their goals are, what their cost of acquisition ROI is, then how can you possibly do your job? Because to me, it's just like being an employee, except you're not getting the benefits, okay? But you have to be as loyal to them as a client as you would be if they were your employer. And it just boggles my mind to see some of these folks that they walk in and, here's, I'll send you an invoice and I'll get started right away, without asking any questions. Or they ask the questions and they say, I asked the client these 7 questions, he could only answer 6 of them. And you didn't push back. When are you going to teach him this stuff? That's not my job. You're not paying me to teach him. Well, you can't do your job without the information, so he's just paying you to cash your check. That, to me, sucks.
Yeah. And that's why I think some of us have customers that have been established for years, a lot of years. Everybody has turnover. It happens, and for a lot of reasons. And it's really, really rare, at least, for me, that to have the turnover because we weren't successful. So I like, maybe there are times where we aren't as successful as we would like to have been. And that's always an issue as well. But that also brings us back to one of the other questions that I tend to ask a lot is, what are your goals? What do you think is going to make this a success in your mind? And if they just say more sales, then we have to pump the brakes again. It's like, no, that's, while yes, more sales are a valid goal, we need to define what that means. Because I can get you more sales, I just can't guarantee you'll make more money at that rate.
Well, and the other thing is, you can't guarantee if they're going to be able to service those clients. And I think sometimes it's more pronounced in a service organization than it is in a hard product. That if I went out tomorrow and signed 6 new clients, I would be up against the wall. I could not service them alone, And I had a good enough fourth quarter that I'm already a little bit in the corner in terms of time and bandwidth. So getting me more sales would not be doing me any favors. It could be the stone that puts me under,
Right.
because then I could
Right.
be so slow on response or inattentive, and I could lose some good long-term clients because I'm no longer delivering the kind of service they've come to expect. So, that if they don't know their goals and they can't tell you their abilities, you got your hands tied right off the bat.
Well,
And
yeah, and I've been involved in a few scenarios like that as well, where people come in and say, "Oh yeah, well I can triple the number of leads you're getting." It's like, well, we can't service that many leads. Nobody can. I mean, it's not possible. So getting me 3 times as many leads is just throwing money away. Now maybe getting 5 or 6 of the right leads makes a difference. And that's where the discussion goes with, everybody wants to say, well, who's your ideal customer? Well, yeah, everybody has an ideal customer, at least they should. But who are your other customers? Where at in the pecking order do you want to search for customers? Are you looking for somebody that's going to be a lifetime customer? Are you looking to do a lot of, middle sales? Say you're doing retail and you sell pianos. How many full grand pianos versus baby grands or versus uprights? These are 3 very different customers looking for very different things. So you have to be able to plan for that as well. You can't just say, well, sell pianos or gun safes or whatever. If you're not able to break the customer down into different audiences like that, you're going to have a hard time being successful over time. At least in a way that makes sense from a solid return on investment.
Yep. And another aspect that has just the first of this month has become a major consideration, even for just a pure US based business, is where is your customer?
Yeah.
Because if you or your customers are in California, for instance, the new CCPA is just like you're dealing in Europe almost. It's nearly as stringent in terms of privacy management. So if you're going to be handling transactions with people in California, you have a whole new set of rules, and they're being very aggressive on enforcement. There's a short-term grace period before they start really hammering people, but they've been very, very vague on what that period is going to be, and it's expected to be a handful of months, not years. So if you don't know where your customer is, your shipping costs are up in the air. You don't know, if your average customer is going to be 7 states away and you're offering free shipping, that has a major impact on your margins.
Yeah. And the cost of shipping has skyrocketed.
Oh yeah, and it's not going to go down. It's going to be going up. People think these new auto-driving trucks are going to drive costs down. I got bad news for you, folks. Nothing drives costs down.
We've been running into that in our new startup business here. I was trying to figure out why some of the stuff is selling for the price that it's selling for. And so we made a few samples, and we went down to the post office and UPS and FedEx and said, here, how much to ship this? And I was stunned, to say the least, at how much it costs to put that in a box and ship it. And
like your trade,
okay,
like your
yeah,
board,
for the woodworking stuff. And it's like, okay, now I understand why people's prices are at the point they're at, because they're giving free shipping.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, so if I was to sell this to somebody locally, it would be $45. But if I'm going to ship it and send it to somebody, it's got to be $75 just to get it, just for me to make the same amount of money.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother issue we're starting to look at, as far as for one of my businesses. What do we do and how do we deal with this from a pricing standpoint? Because does it make sense to make the local customers pay for things that aren't going to be shipped? Or do we give them a discount? And if we do that, then how do we define that on the website?
Yeah, that's a tricky one there.
It becomes a real issue. So I don't know. We'll have to see how things go there.
Well, the other thing
But
I just came across recently with a new customer, a new client here about a month ago, that he has, he sells both services and product. And he's been
Mhm.
running them all. It was one business. You know, you could order this or you could order that. And everything was run the same way. Everything is priced. You know, he had his baseline price on what his costs were, production costs for the hard product. And he had worked up his costs on doing the services. And he did a reasonably good job of it, but he was running everything the same way. He just, he looks at it, his business and says, okay, I'm making a 15% margin over here, and I'm making a 6% margin over here. Therefore, my average is 15%. And
Yeah.
he's basically running two radically different businesses under the same set of guidelines, and it just doesn't work.
No.
As opposed to trying to make the effort to run two separate businesses separately, it just blew his mind. He just wasn't prepared to even think about doing that. So he just, I'll just average this out. And he was taking a bath because most of his product that moved was the 6% stuff. That was 3/4 of his business. So that's not how you average. I'm sorry. Yeah, look at the total sales
No,
at the very least, you know. But it's amazing and a little bit frightening to see how little understanding some business people have of the many things that can affect their success or failure on a day-to-day basis. And
great.
especially if you're a small business and you're going payday to payday, you know, payroll to payroll or rent month to rent month, it becomes super critical. You just stumble one time and you're behind the 8 ball. And it's very hard to get out from behind that 8 ball. I've been there. So, you know, you can't afford that.
Well, you know, and that comes down to, you know, another issue that brings up is who are their competitors?
Yeah.
Are they competing in a relatively small market or a big market? Who do they consider their biggest competitors? Are we talking local? Are we talking national? Because that leads me into the question of budget, which is a hard one to talk about, especially early in the conversation, but it needs to be brought up. Because if you're in a national market and you're just starting out and your heavy competitors have been going for 10, 15 years, you've got a long haul ahead of you, and a $300, $500 a month SEO budget that some guy on Facebook says they can do it for, that's not going to do you any good. You might as well set that money on fire.
Yep.
Because you won't catch the guys. And then you have to start deciding, okay, let's just assume you're going to be relegated to page 2 for the important stuff that you really, really want to rank to. What options do we have to get you on page 1? Do we have to do pay-per-click? Or are we going to have the ability to get some of your side products doing well enough that we can funnel that traffic into your better products? It becomes a real campaign, you got to really plan these things out. If you're going to go straight up, you know, let's do supplements. You know, how many people are you going to have to compete against in the supplement market if you have a brand new toe fungus cleaner? You know, you're going to have to go straight to pay-per-click. You're going to have to go straight to email to even begin to have a chance to sell anything at all up front, because you're going to have to deal with all the pharmacies, all the Walmarts, and all the random Amazon stuff. It becomes a real challenge to determine what the best avenue is for you. So knowing who your competitors are, how long they've been at it, and doing, if not a deep dive into their businesses, at least a decent competitor analysis to determine. Because again, I've turned away clients that, you know, well, I've only got $500 a month. It's like, well, in your industry, that's like 12 clicks.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, it's really hard to
and a 1%
justify
closing rate, you know, do the math.
Yeah. do the math. It's going to be a while. So there's so many things beyond the basics of actually doing the job that if you don't get cleared up ahead of time, you're just setting yourself up and your client for failure. And then they're going to go off to the next guy and say, well, you know, the last guy I liked him real well, but nothing worked, and we had to let him go. And now I don't have any money, so could you do it cheaper? No. In fact, I'm going to charge you more because now I got to go clean up his mess. And, you know, that helps in some ways, but it doesn't help the client.
Well, it's kind of the flip side of setting expectations. You know, you need to make the client understand what you can hopefully accomplish in what period of time, but you also have to have an understanding of what the client can do, already has done, is capable of doing to follow through. You know, I do a site audit for somebody and I send them a list of 33 things that need to be done, and I come to find out their in-house developer can't spell PHP, you know, doesn't have any understanding of even HTML sometimes. You know, he did a one-button install for WordPress. And
Yeah, don't get Terry involved.
Now, this is not a developer. This is an intern, okay?
Yeah.
And if you want me,
Terry loses shit.
You can go hire yourself a full-time developer that'll do this stuff for $17 an hour maybe, or you can pay me $125 an hour to do it. You know, do the math.
Yeah. And I'd rather you pay me.
Yeah. Actually, I wouldn't. I don't really want to be involved in the hands-on stuff back there because it always ends up coming back and biting you in the butt.
Well, it's just like I was talking with a new potential client just a couple days ago, and we were discussing the types of websites that I work on, and I like the real easy stuff, the point click done. Those are fine. They're mindless. I can get them, bang them out. They're easy money. And I like the far end of the other extreme, where you have to really know your shit to make that website. It's not a WordPress install. It is full on custom up from the bottom. And I like those as well, simply because they let you do some very cool stuff. Yeah. But they're not cheap. You know, when somebody says they give you a list of all the stuff they want to do with their website, and you go, so basically you want me to build you eBay or Amazon or Realtor.com. And they go, yeah. And I go, fine, how many millions of dollars do you have? And they're like, wait, you can't just do this for like $3 or $4 grand? It's like, no. Those companies are spending millions of dollars every year on their websites just to keep them running, let alone make them better. Yep. And so it becomes a challenge to figure out what customers, you know, from an agency or a consultant point of view, which customers to say no to, because and I know it's hard to say no, because I mean I run into that trap myself sometimes where it's like, well, I could really use that extra check every month, but am I going to be able to do a good enough job to get that extra check for more than 2 months?
Yep. Yeah, it's tough sometimes to tell. That's one of the reasons, you know, where I focus mostly on the technical aspect. So many of my jobs are going to start with a site audit, a tech audit. So I get an awful lot of information before I even look at offering them any kind of ongoing services. And you know, I'm not even doing much of that anymore. I generally push that stuff to you, but it's just invaluable. Really getting down the nitty gritty and knowing whether it's you having to dig it up or the customer being able to tell you. And I find they rarely can tell you some of the important stuff like ROI, cost of acquisition. Most of them know who their 2 or 3 major local competitors are, and that's about as deep as their marketing knowledge runs on the small side.
I talked with a client last fall, somewhere in October, and they're like, why is it everybody who, you know, I talk to about doing this for me wants to do an audit? This is ridiculous. I don't want to pay for an audit. I want you to just come in and do the work. And it's like, well, okay, do you take your car to a mechanic and say, there's something wrong with it, fix it, and just have him start replacing parts? Or do you want him to go through and do the diagnostics necessary to find out actually what's broken and what needs to be fixed? Because without the audit, that's all we're doing, is we're just throwing stuff at it to see what it hits.
That's a good analogy.
And so, explained that way, it tends to help. We've also kind of gotten in the path of, you just say, here are the things that have to be done before we even start. And these things can take upwards of a month to get completed. So your first month is going to be doing nothing but the research, doing the competitor analysis, I hate the word keyword research, but that's, basically what it is. And you're doing your site audits or whatever that's required to do the job. Because if you don't do those things up front, how do you even put together a plan or what needs to be done next?
Yeah, if you don't know where you're starting from, it's kind of hard to lay out a map for your journey.
Yeah. So, trying to think of some another issue that comes up on a relatively regular basis is, who else are you working with? I don't do social media at all. I'm a big believer that social media really should be done in-house, because that's the person that's there. If you're a major brand like Wendy's or whatever, it's different. But if you're a mom and pop, that social media has to be yours. It has to be off your phone. The same thing if they're bringing me in to do SEO. Do they have somebody doing PPC? Or vice versa, if they bring me in to do PPC, do they have somebody doing SEO? Because those two things do work together. Are we going to be building the same landing pages or duplicating effort? Is there a way we can work together to take a little load off the client and make both our jobs easier? It's and then the other thing I've also run into is, I talked with a guy, it's probably been a couple years now. He was hired to do link building, and then found out that the company also had 2 or 3 other SEOs doing SEO work, because they figured if they hired 3 of them at $300 a month each, they were better off than paying the one guy $2,000. And it wound up, crashing and burning the website, because the link builder they hired went, oh, cool, automatic button and XRummered, and I forget what the one software was, DigiXmas or whatever, and just started blasting automated links out into the world and ruined everything, because everybody was working in their own little box and there was nobody overseeing all of it. Which brings me to another issue. Who's the point of contact at the company if the company's got more than 3 or 4 employees?
Yep.
Who am I going to be able to call or email when I have an issue?
And get a
decision? Who will be capable of helping? Yeah.
Yeah, that's often a problem, especially like I'm working a job right now. You're aware of that. We've got 3 of us on the project, and nobody's in charge yet. And I know there's going to be some.
I nominate you.
There's going to be some heated discussions, and that does not make for a good outcome for the customer. Somebody's got to be the final decider, as W would say. Somebody has to have the final call on it, and be responsible, be accountable, but also have control. And frankly, I don't necessarily care if it's me or the other guy. I just want to know that I'm going to get a chance to make my input. It's going to be considered, and I will make sure that the customer's aware if I feel like the wrong decision was made. But the customer deserves action, not pissing contests. Yeah. And that so many times when there's multiple players, that's what it ends up being, just a perpetual pissing contest. And then finger pointing after the fact.
We did we wrote a custom piece of software for a company. Oh God, this would have been probably about 2003 or 2004. And I went in for the first corporate meeting, and it was me and 8 other people sitting at the table. And it was wild because, 5 of them were gung ho, let's do it. 2 of them were like, whatever, I don't care. And one of them was just 100% hell bent. This was never going to work. It was a total failure and waste of time. And afterwards, I sat down and talked with the CEO, and I told him, well, here's our project. Here's what we want to do. And I want that person to be my liaison. And they're like, why? She wants the project to fail. It's like, well, but now it can't fail. Because if she lets this project fail, it's her ass and her job, isn't it? He goes, well, yeah, I guess it is. I said, there you go. The one person who hates this project the most is the one I want, because they're going to be the make sure that it gets done right. They're not, they're not going to just take whatever I give them and say good enough. And the people who are excited about it, they don't care. I want that person that's going to be, holding me to the fire saying, well, this sucks. Why is it this way? Because they know that their ass is on the line right along mine.
That I went through a Carnegie course, Jesus, almost 40 years ago, that team building. And that was one of the things that they said, find the least supportive person and engage them. And I remember the guy that was teaching the course to us, what's the easiest way to motivate your biggest naysayer? Make them responsible for the outcome. Make them the boss.
Yeah, make them the boss.
I thought that was brilliant at the time, but yeah, I've seen people do that, and it does work. Team building is an interesting dynamic, and we're always in a team building exercise, even just between, if it's just us and our client, there's still a certain aspect of team building going on there.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, there was one more question that I like to ask, especially if I'm dealing with somebody who's in a I guess a medical field, as far as what kind of oversight did they have to have over things like ad copy and images or brand issues to make sure we don't cross some kind of a legal or ethical line that could be a problem for them.
Well, like your HIPAA compliance, for instance, is a major issue.
Exactly.
Privacy compliance. Most of them are going to at least have on retainer a legal counsel if they don't have somebody on staff when you get into a certain size organization. And a lot of times, you're faced with everything has to go through legal, which usually adds 2 or 3 weeks to the time flow.
At least.
But, it is what it is. But I'd much rather that legal department be responsible for the outcome than me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had a couple of clients in the past that were like that, where, and I'm sure you have too, where every single tweak and change had to be vetted by somebody in legal. Mm-hmm. And I hated that job. I hated it with a passion. And to make me feel better, I set my rate at a point where I didn't feel so bad.
There you go.
And for those of you who are running your own agencies or trying to be SEOs or PPCs, billing extra for problem clients is a valid thing.
Yeah.
There's no reason there's nothing that says you have to charge everybody the same price. There is no law written anywhere that says that. And I've had clients where, especially back when I was doing on-site tech work, networking back in the 90s, where, some people were paying 2 or 3 times as much as other people just because I hated going there. But they paid their bills and they knew that nobody else would go, so they paid it. And it made it not so bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what everybody needs to do is come up with a standard template. Now, maybe you come up with 45 questions and you only use 35 or 38 of them typically, but they may be different 35 or 38 questions depending upon the client you're talking to. But come up with a punch list of questions, and before you talk to a new customer, determine, which of these do I need to have answers to? There's going to be some that are going to be cast in iron. you're going to have access to their GA, to their GSC, to their PPC, but you need to know, because you're going to get sidetracked in every single interview. You're going to get sidetracked and forget to ask until after the fact. Damn it, I forgot to ask them this. Oh, I forgot to request access to that. So be prepared. It also makes you look more professional to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And I have asked questions of clients, said, look, it would be very helpful if I could get this too, or if I knew this. If you don't know it, I will help you figure it out. If you've got it, great. If you don't, it's not a showstopper. It would just save me a lot of time. They appreciate this. And almost
Generally,
9 times out of 10, they come back and say, okay, look, you mentioned this the other day. How do I go about computing that? How do I calculate that? Is it really valuable to me? And that's where I can establish myself more value in their eyes as a consultant, because I can actually educate them. And because I was a business consultant long before I was a digital marketing consultant.
right.
And it's interesting how the two never seem to reside under the same roof.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess this whole discussion that we've had is based more around making sure that you have your client's best interest at heart versus getting that check.
Yeah.
Getting the check is important. That's how you have to feed your family. But like I like to tell clients going in, I want them so happy that they're happy to pay me in yachts. Because if I go into any job with my primary goal is making sure they are more successful with me than without me, they're happy to write the check. And when you have that conversation with them in 6 months or a year and say, look, we've kind of tapped out at where we're at. We need to look at spending more money. That's where your ROI calculations come into effect. It's not enough that the client made money. They've got to make real money. I mean, okay, for example, if they've got a 50% ROI, that's great. That's fine. They're happy to keep going at that. But if you can get them an 800% ROI, which is possible, and we've all, most of us have been there, when you hit those kinds of levels, the reins are taken off. And they tell you spend as much as you can spend. And I've had those discussions with clients. It's like, look, if we're between 0 and 100% ROI or 200% ROI, we're just going to keep working and massaging things. But when we hit that 400, 500% ROI, I'm going to come to you and want you to spend more money. Because obviously you're going to want to, because for every dollar you spend, you're making 5 or 10. Why not?
Well, the ideal goal there is whichever manager made the decision to sign that contract and bring you on board, you want to make him look like a superstar.
Yeah, exactly. So, but if you have any other questions, if maybe Doc and I will make this a project, start developing something that we could share with people as some of our most commonly asked intake questions, at least from a business point of view, that you might find useful, or if you just want to have a conversation about the whole topic. Be sure to get in touch with us, either through the website or Facebook. Both of us are more than happy to help. That's kind of why we call the thing Mentors on Tap. We like helping people out who want to be successful. If you are just going to bleed us for information, we'll know. We've seen it, been there, done that. But we're always looking to help people, especially people who are starting out and who really want to be successful in the business.
And you could also reach out to us. Our email is ask@mentorsontap.com. And you can use that email or whatever way you get a hold of us too to let us know of some topics you'd love to see us talk about on Mentors on Tap.
Definitely.
So thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been fun, and we will see you next week.